Hello, welcome back to Universally Me. I'm Antonia Carlotta, and today I'm standing in a video for literally the first time since the first video that I ever made. It feels really weird. I feel like I look weird, but I think that's just because I'm not used to it. I'll find out in editing. I'm also still waiting on some stuff to arrive behind me. I also have a cold right now. It's been a good year. I just really wanted to get started on this, so we're gonna roll with it. Today, we're taking a universal journey from the silent era of film to sound, and we're going to look at the trials and triumphs of Universal Studios under Carl Laemmle and Jr.'s leadership and how they finally managed to break through. I'll be honest, Universal wasn't the first studio to transition to sound, and they definitely didn't have it all figured out. But Uncle Carl and Jr. had the spirit, and they managed to work it out. A lot changed in just a few years. Universal was always a smart and innovative studio. Carl Laemmle, its founder, invented Universal City, the world's first and only entire movie-making city where people lived and worked together. He also invented the idea of a movie star, with Florence Lawrence and some wild publicity stunts he planned around her. He invented the movie studio tour. He was a master of publicity. And under his leadership, Universal made some amazing silent films. Of course, my mind goes first to movies like The Hunchback of Notre Dame, The Phantom of the Opera, The Man Who Laughs. Universal was also known for its westerns with stars like Harry Carey. In the old days of the studio tour, audiences would get to see the filming of a silent western, and they were encouraged to cheer for the good guys and boo the bad guys. We all know the first sound film was The Jazz Singer. Audiences were so excited to finally hear somebody speak on screen. But with this, Carl Laemmle had to make a choice. Was this the future of film, or was it just a flash in the pan? Things were moving fast, and Uncle Carl didn't have a lot of time to think. But lucky for him, Junior was already on it. Junior had been raised on the Universal Studios backlot, being primed since he was just a kid to one day take over his dad's place as head of the studio. Fox and Warner Brothers were the first two studios making talkies. They were the only two, really, since they were the only two with the sound equipment, and they had advanced orders for all the new sound equipment from the manufacturer. Thinking quickly, Junior reached out to Fox and asked if he could rent their sound equipment for a weekend. Just a weekend. He said he wanted to do some tests, and thinking that there wasn't much he could do in a weekend, Fox said, okay. Well, wouldn't you know it, Junior managed to make an entire movie in that one weekend. And that is how Universal's very first talkie got made in 1928. It was called Melody of Love, and today it's considered a lost film. For a few years, Universal made part talkie films, or even sometimes both silent and sound versions of films at the same time. All Quiet on the Western Front shot both a silent and sound version of the film. Showboat was a part talkie, and Phantom of the Opera even had a re-release that was part sound, where they added some reshoots and new scenes. But this double duty couldn't go on forever. Hundreds of millions of dollars had been spent converting theaters to sound. And then in the midst of it all, the Great Depression hit. And then suddenly nobody knew if they were going to be able to recoup their money. Thankfully, Universal hadn't invested too much in theaters, so they weren't in as a precarious position as some of the other studios. But they weren't out of the woods either. Audiences dwindled, admission prices dropped, and suddenly the film industry, which was still relatively new, they didn't even know if they could survive. As an aside, we often don't think about this, but thousands of musicians lost their jobs in the midst of the Depression with the advent of sound, as theaters didn't need the musicians to accompany films anymore. It's just such an interesting byproduct of sound that I think gets forgotten. Universal had to find a way to demonstrate its commitment to making movies that were truly universal and to get audiences in theaters watching their sound films around the world. And that is how they started making multi-language versions of films, the most famous of these being Dracula. When movies were silent, movies could be shown basically identically around the world. You would just swap out a few title cards and you're good to go. With sound film, not so easy. Multi-language versions of films would reuse stories, sets, costumes, sometimes even directors, but would swap out the cast with a new cast speaking Spanish, French, German, Italian, any language considered marketable, really. In the case of Universal's Dracula, while during the day, Bela Lugosi, Dwight Frye, David Manners, and Helen Chandler would show up to film their scenes, at night, when they went home, the Spanish Dracula cast would come in and shoot the very same movie on the very same sets. Today, many people consider Spanish Dracula to be the superior version of Dracula. Multi-language versions of films were made for just a few years as they became seen as too costly and time-consuming, and other options like dubbing and subtitles became more common. Let's talk about some of the other struggles in the sound era that weren't just exclusive to Universal. Many actors, even big stars in the silent era, struggled to get work in the sound era. Audiences just couldn't accept when an actor's voice didn't match with what they'd imagined. Even acting styles changed. Acting became much more grounded in reality. It wasn't as big or dramatic or exaggerated anymore. And actors couldn't move as much since they had a microphone to take into account. And some actors struggled with memorizing lines, which they'd never had to do before. Many foreign actors simply left the country if they didn't speak good English or if they had a thick accent. I think I most recently spoke about this in regard to Conrad Veidt, who left the country because he had a thick German accent and finally moved back, only to be typecast as Nazis for the rest of his life. Directors, too, struggled at not being able to yell commands at the cast and crew while they were rolling. And, of course, our precious studio tour had to come to an end. Though in the early days it was part of the excitement to cheer on your hero and boo the villain, well, now the smallest sound could ruin a take, so they couldn't risk having an audience. By 1931, just 3 years later, silent movies were basically ancient history. And Junior Laemmle, now head of production at Universal, he brought us some lavish productions, amazing musicals, and of course, the Universal monsters. Uncle Carl and Junior were in uncharted territory as they navigated the transition from silent to sound. And their work not only reshaped Universal, but helped to reshape the entire industry. It's a testament to their innovation and resilience. And today, when we watch movies full of sound and dialogue, we are watching the legacy of these pioneers who took a big chance on some big changes less than a century ago. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Antonia Carlotta. Join the Laemmle family on Patreon or with a paid YouTube membership for bonus content and to support my work. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.